first of all, these issues are all facets of the same reality. Whether we're talking about marriage equality or um, talking about the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, or we're talking about anti-bullying laws, or the recently repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. They're all facets of the same reality. And what the strain that they all share in common is that at core what they're saying is that somehow this group of people is less than everyone else. And when you say that anyone in a society is less than, you are giving a clue, or cue rather, to people who are less educated or who are in the process of development, like children, that somehow this is fair game, this is a target. And so, in fact, I was speaking with someone the other day when in the Third Reich, Jews were singled out, and they were you had the Nuremberg laws of '37 that stripped them of their German citizenship, and you couldn't marry, an Aryan couldn't marry a Jewish person. That something about them was defective, something was socially corrosive. And I think that's what in fact is happening with people who have a gay or a lesbian orientation. And the American Psychological Association very clearly stated that we don't elect our orientation. I had a young woman come to me. She was an altar girl. And she came to me at the Saturday evening, after the Saturday evening Mass, and I was taking off the chasuble, and she said, "Father, could you please speak with my mother?" And I said, "Lupe, that's not a real name." I said, "Lupe, I would be happy to speak to your mom. But what do you want me to talk to your mother about?" He says, "Father, I'm a lesbian. And I don't know how to speak to my mom about this. I don't know how to tell her." I was working in a Latino parish at the time. So I said, "Yes, Lupe, I'll be happy to speak with your mom." So that Thursday, the mother comes into the office with her daughter in tow. She says, "Father, what do you want?" And I said, "You know, Maria, there was a time in life when our biggest worries were, what are you going to get for the holidays? What are you going to get for your birthday? What's the field trip at the end of the school year? And Saturday morning cartoons." And then we got acne, our bodies began to change. And we had feelings come over us that we had never had before of attraction, physical attraction for other people. And I said, "Your daughter went through that same reality, except she was attracted to people of her same gender." And I remember the woman's eyes, I could see her eyes, and she was processing what I was saying. And I said, "I think that what every parent most wants for their son or daughter is that they will meet somebody that honestly loves them and walks with them through life's journey." And I said, "That's what your daughter wants for herself as well. It just so happens to be with someone of her own gender." And I remember that, the mom's eyes began to swell up with tears. She turned to her daughter, embraced and kissed her, and I said, "Thank you." And I said thank you because it could have gone the other way. I had a brother priest who was approached a similar scenario, except it was a young man. And the young man came in and said, "Would you call my mom?" And the woman wouldn't even come in to see the priest. They had to speak over the phone. And she said, "I'd rather he be dead." Now, if a stranger on the street says that to you, you tell them where to go and what to do when they get there. But if your mother says that to you, that's like somebody rammed a baseball bat into your gut. Yeah. And those are wounds that will never fully heal in the human heart. And you will remember, because it's your mother, for God's sakes. So these are all interrelated. And ultimately what it's about is saying, you are less than everyone else for something you never chose. Well, I think the first step is awareness. There's a film that's just been released. It's about to be released, and there's been a big brouhaha about the film because they wanted to release it with an R rating because they use obscenities as part of the film. Right. And so they wanted to give it an R. Ironically, the film is about bullying, and I understand that one of the the young people who is depicted in the film actually appealed to the ratings committee, and basically that was set aside because we have these norms and da 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 da. Think about it. This is a film that's supposed to depict what's happening, a documentary, and they want to sanitize it for public consumption. But in doing that, paradoxically, what they're doing is they're minimizing what this young man who's depicted in the film had to endure. They're candy coating reality. And the reality is that the Center for Disease Control in 1999 did a youth at risk study. And they said that 1/3 of gay adolescents attempt suicide. 1/3, which is astronomical. So what would drive young people to the brink of taking their own life? And it's not an event. It is a series of events that happens year after year after year after year, day after day. Imagine going to work and being emotionally harassed every day. Imagine what that would be like. And realize that these are people who are not fully developed. They don't have an adult skill set. They don't have an adult emotional toolkit to go to. These are children who are being harassed every day. And not reflected in those numbers from the Center for Disease Control study is the increased incidence of alcohol abuse, the increased incidence of substance abuse. And in those instances where a child has been shunned by the parents because of their religious beliefs, because they've been told by some member of the clergy that they have to do tough love with their kid to put them back on the right path. Visit any major urban center. Go to Santa Monica Boulevard or Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles, or the Castro in San Francisco, or Christopher Street in New York, or Halsted Street in Chicago, and you will find young people who are selling their bodies on the street because it's the only way they have to support themselves, to sustain themselves, because some member of the clergy told their parents, you have to be tough with him, you have to be tough with her, and you have to get them to be on the straight and narrow. In the name of morality, they are pushing these kids into a destructive life. How does that please God?
Please.
Well, that's an interesting question. You know, the French have a saying, to understand all is to forgive all. And so when you talk about an abuser, maybe some of those kids are themselves gay. Why would they be so interested in this subject? Why? And I think there are various plausible answers. I mean, some people go to church on Sunday and they hear a member of the clergy from the pulpit say that these people are a cancer in society, that they're undermining marriage, they're a threat to society. So if a young person hears that these are the people with the black hats, these are the bad guys, these are the people who are going to undermine your family and your community. And then they see someone in the school bus that's effeminate, or someone in homeroom or at the lunch line that is perceived as being gay, they will attack that person. So part of the motivation can be simply that they have heard these untruths from the pulpit, and then they go and they try to correct these people. And then yes, it is true that there are some people who themselves, what's the old adage, we hate most in ourselves what we hate most in others. And so if I can suppress it over there, maybe I can suppress it in here. Or maybe somebody won't know, because if I attack this guy or this gal, then I'll be above suspicion. That could be. I think that when you have sustained abuse that is visited on a human being continuously, and in many of these cases, this begins as early as kindergarten or the first grade, and escalates as people approach puberty and they're in grammar school, middle school, or junior high. It's not an event, and when it's concentrated on a person, and it's concentrated year after year after year, it has driven many people to take their lives because of despair. When administrators dismiss this, what they're saying is, it's like a waitress that says, "That's not my table." You know, it's not my job. You know, my job is to make sure we're in budget. My job is to make sure that the school operates the way that it's mandated by the school district. My job is not to take care of the, you know, and then you throw in the wild card of religion. And so if you happen to belong to a fundamentalist church, or you have a very traditionalist person from a mainline church that is in cast as a role of administrator, that colors how they view this as well. So there isn't a simple answer. I think, though, at the end of the day, what society can expect from anybody who is hired by the school district is that that person can set aside their personal beliefs on some of these questions and deal with these children in a way that is constructive and protective of them. No one should have to be afraid to go to school, and a lot of kids are. And if you're afraid to go to school, you're not going to be able to learn, you're not going to be able to develop, and that undermines the purpose of a school. Well, I think America has a love-hate relationship with sex. I mean, Madison Avenue uses it to sell everything from automobiles to razor blades. And at the same time, if it's discovered that a politician had a relationship outside of marriage, then, oh my God, he's not qualified for public office, never mind experience or past records. And I think in a way it comes from the Puritan roots of this country. What happened in Dominica, it's a former British colony, as I understand, what happened in Dominica was there was a cruise ship that was a gay cruise that came into port. And there was a couple that were in their cabin, and a dock worker saw them, and the initial reports were that he saw them engaging in sex, which turned out to be inaccurate. Later on, they were just partially clothed in their cabin. I remember being on a ship several years ago and was walking on the promenade deck, and there were several passengers that were gathered by a window. They were looking inside because the woman had come out of her shower, and she was undressed. She'd just come out of the shower naked, and she was oblivious to the fact that her window was on the, people were walking by. And so people were looking and laughing, and finally she heard the commotion, saw, and she became flustered and covered herself and ran in. When you're on a ship at sea, one day the view can be the ocean, and the next day there's people there. So I think you have to put this in context. Then what happened in Dominica was that they were summoned to the captain's cabin. And I understand military police came on board the ship, and these people were ejected by the cruise line and remanded to the authorities. They were then put into a cell, and the cell, in the interviews they gave later, had all sorts of feces and urine, cockroaches and ants. They were held there for a time. They didn't get food. They asked repeatedly to speak to an attorney. They were put off. And when they were transported to the jail, people were beating on the police car as they were driving up to the courthouse, and they were told to run into the courthouse as fast as possible. These people were in fear for their life. Now, I have this general rule of thumb when it comes to these issues. If this had been a heterosexual couple, what would the reaction be? And I think it would be markedly different. I think what happens is when people talk about gay or lesbian people, they instantly focus in on sex. Now, my parents were married in 1956. The last thing I imagine when I imagine my mom and dad's marriage is what they do in bed. I'm sure it's part of their marriage, but that's not what a relationship is. A relationship is far more than simply sex. Sex is part of it. It's an important part, but it's far more than that. But to reduce, well, you know, an entire group of people and demonize them simply because of a physical act that is part of being a human being is both unjust and unreasonable. I think that these people were in a cabin on holiday, and they made a mountain out of a molehill. They wouldn't, I believe, have done it if it was straight.